What would you do if a 7-year-old boy ran toward you screaming not to get in your car just seconds before it exploded? The morning was picture perfect in Woodland Heights. Sunlight filtered through the maple trees. The sidewalks were damp with sprinkler mist, and the only sounds were chirping birds and distant lawnmowers. It was the kind of day that made people believe nothing bad could happen. But beneath that serene surface, something deadly waited. Preston Maddox, the 42-year-old billionaire tech mogul behind Virion Systems, zipped up his navy suit jacket and glanced at the clock on his phone. 9:17 a.m. He was scheduled to deliver a keynote at the Tech Education Gala across town, a private appearance, meant to quietly unveil a $5 million donation to underfunded public schools. No cameras, no entourage. Preston had deliberately rented an Airbnb under an alias to avoid media attention. He'd told only his security chief about his whereabouts, instructing them to stand by but remain out of sight. This morning was meant to be quiet, meaningful. A small, personal gesture of goodwill from a man who had spent years under headlines. Outside, a sleek, yellow Ferrari gleamed like a trophy in the driveway. It was Preston's pride of personal indulgence he rarely drove. Today, he'd make an exception. He stepped out into the sunlight, polished shoes clicking against the brick walkway. In his hand was just his phone. No briefcase, no security. A rare moment of autonomy. As he approached the car, he felt calm, focused. He opened the driver's side door and gripped the edge with his left hand. His right foot lifted instinctively toward the pedal. Then it happened. A voice pierced the morning stillness. "Don't get in the car!" Startled, Preston froze mid-motion. He turned toward the source of the sound and saw a small boyno, older than 7, sprinting toward him across the street. The child's green jacket flapped wildly as he ran, his face contorted in panic. Tears streaked his cheeks. "Please, don't sit down," the boy cried again, breathless. Preston straightened, bewildered. "What?" The boy didn't stop running. "There's something in there. I saw a man put it there this morning. Wires, a box." "Please, mister, it's not safe." Something in the child's voice froze the air in Preston's lungs. It wasn't just panic, it was conviction. Genuine terror. He glanced under the driver's seat. There it was. Just a flicker of red. Blinking. His heart stopped. He stepped back slowly, one foot after another, until he was clear of the car. 3 minutes later, 2 black SUVs came tearing down the street. Preston's private security team leapt out before the vehicles had fully stopped. Their movements were swift, surgical. One agent examined the undercarriage while another cautiously scanned the car's interior. "Confirmed," one agent said through clenched teeth. "Motion-triggered explosive. If you'd sat down, it would have detonated." Preston didn't respond. He couldn't. His eyes were fixed on the boy, the one who had run across a lawn and screamed just in time to save his life. The boy stood on the sidewalk now, hugging himself, his face pale. Preston approached slowly and crouched to his level. "What's your name?" "Elijah," the boy whispered. "Elijah, you just saved my life. Do you understand that?" Elijah nodded, then looked down. "I thought I was going to get in trouble." Preston looked around. "Where's your mom?" "Still sleeping. She works overnight at the hospital." "I wanted to call 911, but the Wi-Fi wasn't working, so I ran." The man who'd spent years building billion-dollar systems was speechless. Because in that moment, all the money, the power, the security, none of it had saved him. A 7-year-old boy had. The street filled with flashing lights and uniformed officers. Yellow tape went up. Neighbors gathered behind fences. But for Preston, everything else faded into the background. There was only Elijah, a small boy in a green jacket who didn't hesitate. And as Preston stood under the bright morning sun, one thought echoed in his mind. Why did this boy have to be the one to protect me? And who would have benefited if he hadn't? The bomb squad confirmed what Preston's team already feared. The device wasn't amateur work. It was precise, built to trigger upon a specific weight hitting the seat. In other words, it had been crafted to kill him and no one else. The technician said, "It was personal. Whoever planted this knew your routine, your car, your habits." Preston watched from the curb, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. He was alive but rattled in a way that no financial loss or business betrayal had ever shaken him. It wasn't the danger that haunted him, it was the boy. Elijah. Why had a child seen what trained adults missed? And more importantly, why had Elijah run into danger instead of away from it? Later that afternoon, Preston sat in the back of a dark SUV, scrolling through footage from neighborhood cameras. His security chief, Naomi Grant, sat across from him. "There," she said, pausing a grainy video from a house across the street. 5:03 a.m. That's our guy. On screen, a hooded figure crept up to the Ferrari, crouched, and appeared to place something beneath the driver's seat. He moved with confidence, not hesitation. 5 minutes later, he was gone. Naomi rewound the tape. "Wait, look at the walk." Preston leaned in. There was a slight limp. His breath caught. "No, it can't be." "You recognize him?" "I think I do." 15 years ago, his name's Raymond Keller. He was one of the earliest engineers at Virion Systems. Brilliant, but unstable. He tried to sell our prototype to a competitor. I pressed charges. He went to prison. Naomi raised a brow. Motive. Revenge. He lost everything, Preston added quietly. Career. Custody. His daughter. Naomi stared at him. And you think he just came back? Not just. Calculated. He wanted to erase me. Not with scandal, not with lawsuits, with silence. Preston leaned back and exhaled slowly. He turned back to Naomi. Find out where he's been, and find out everything you can about Elijah Thompson and his mother. Quietly, no press. You want to help them? Preston nodded. Yes. But I also want to know why a 7-year-old boy had to risk his life to do what our entire security team didn't. Outside, the sun dipped lower over Woodland Heights, but inside that SUV, Preston Maddox's mind was sharper than ever. Someone had tried to kill him. A child had stopped it, and somewhere in the ruins of an old betrayal, a new bond was being formed. And maybe, just maybe, that bond would be stronger than vengeance. Preston Maddox had faced boardroom coups, hostile takeovers, and the crushing pressure of tech launches worth billions. But nothing rattled him quite like the face he saw on that grainy security footage. Raymond Keller. Once upon a time, he had been Virion Systems' golden boy, brilliant, inventive, loyal, or so Preston thought. 15 years earlier, Raymond had tried to steal proprietary designs from the company they helped build. The betrayal was surgical. He planned to sell the code to a foreign competitor, sabotage the product timeline, and vanish with millions. But he didn't get far. Preston's decision was swift and unemotional. Press charges, testify, let the justice system handle it. Raymond went to prison. His reputation, career, finances gone overnight. Worse, he lost custody of his young daughter in the fallout. And now, that man had planted a bomb beneath Preston's car. Preston leaned forward on the leather sofa inside his hotel suite. The room was still, the shades drawn. His security chief, Naomi Grant, stood nearby, watching his reaction carefully. He was released from prison 8 months ago, she confirmed. No fixed address, but 2 weeks ago, a traffic cam caught him entering Woodland Heights. Nothing since. Preston stared at the frozen image of Raymond on the screen. And that boy Elijah, he saw him. Yes, Naomi said. He watched Raymond place the device just before sunrise. The kid's been drawing the same green jacket and black gloves all week, according to the officer on site. Preston rubbed his hands together slowly. And he ran. He didn't hide. He ran to me. There was silence. Then he looked up. Naomi, I want to help them. The boy, his mom. Naomi crossed her arms. They didn't ask for anything. The mother refused our stipend offer, told the officer she doesn't want handouts or attention. I'm not trying to buy them, Preston said firmly. I want to understand what kind of child sees danger and runs toward it. And I want to protect that kind of child. Later that evening, Preston returned to Woodland Heights, but not in a flashy car. He arrived in a plain black SUV, wearing jeans and a grey sweater. No bodyguards followed him inside. The small brick house was modest but clean. A swing set stood slightly rusted in the backyard, and flower beds lined the front steps. When he knocked, the door opened slowly. Melody Thompson looked exhausted, still in hospital scrubs, dark circles beneath her eyes. Her stance was wary. You're Mr. Maddox? Yes, ma'am. I came to thank your son, properly. She hesitated. He's upstairs, quiet since yesterday. He didn't do anything wrong. He saved my life, Preston replied. That's never wrong. Elijah was curled up in bed, clutching a stuffed lion. He looked up wide-eyed when Preston entered the room. Hey, Elijah, Preston said gently. Do you remember me? The boy nodded. I just wanted to say, I was really scared yesterday, but you were brave. You didn't freeze. You didn't run away. You ran to help. I thought you'd be mad, Elijah whispered. Preston smiled. I was grateful. You did something most adults wouldn't dare. He paused. Can I tell you a secret? Elijah nodded. I was scared too. But you gave me courage. Downstairs, Melody sat with Preston at the kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a chipped mug of tea. I work 2 jobs, she said. Elijah's father passed 2 years ago. We don't have much, but I'm proud of who he is. I just don't want him to be turned into a headline. I understand, Preston said sincerely, and I promise none of this will be public unless you want it to be. She looked at him for a long moment. Then her voice softened. Thank you for seeing him. Most people wouldn't. Preston smiled. He saw me first. Back in his car, Preston opened a new file on his tablet and titled it Legacy. Not about stocks, not about patents, but about impact. About the people who changed lives quietly. At the top of the file, he typed a name. Elijah Thompson. And for the first time in a long time, the billionaire leaned back and thought not about empire, but about purpose. The following morning, Melody Thompson opened her front door to find a small, unmarked package on the porch. No label. No note, just a discreet envelope tucked under the ribbon. Inside the box was a brand new digital tablet, top of the line, still sealed. And in the envelope, a simple handwritten message, for the boy who saw what no one else did, PM. Melody stood frozen for a long moment. She knew exactly who it was from. It wasn't charity. It wasn't flashy. It was gratitude expressed in silence. Meanwhile, in a suite at the Maddox Grand Tower, Preston sat reviewing data that had nothing to do with stocks or quarterly earnings. It was a background report, not on a business competitor, but on Elijah's life. He hated himself for it a little. But he needed to understand the boy, where he came from, what shaped him into someone who would sprint into danger for a stranger. There was no father listed. Deceased 2 years ago from a steel factory incident. Medical bills unpaid. Elijah's mother, Melody, had been juggling 2 nursing jobs ever since. No discipline issues in school. Above average reading comprehension. Loved drawing. Once got suspended for breaking up a fight between 2 classmates. Preston smiled faintly. Even at age 7, the kid had a pattern. Naomi Grant entered the office. You're getting heat, she said without ceremony. Preston looked up. From who? Your board, your PR team. They're asking why you've postponed the gala speech, why you cancelled your Ferrari order, Why you're sending packages to people they've never heard of. Preston leaned back. They'll live. Naomi hesitated, then lowered her voice. We also found out something else. The bomb. It was custom wired. It would have gone off the second your full body weight hit the driver's seat. No delay. No timer. No warning. Preston said nothing. He wanted it to be clean. Quiet, no spectacle, just gone. Naomi placed a thin manila folder on the table. And here's the part you're not gonna like. Preston opened it. Inside was a surveillance still, time-stamped 5:03 a.m. The image was grainy, but the man's posture was unmistakable. Raymond Keller, hunched slightly from the weight of the years, but the face, still bitter, still vengeful. I knew it, Preston whispered. Naomi nodded. And get this, he was spotted 3 blocks from the Thompson home a week earlier. He knew where the boy lived. Maybe where you'd be. Preston's blood ran cold. That afternoon, Melody got another knock at the door. This time, it wasn't Preston, it was Naomi. Professional, direct. Unmistakably powerful. We need to talk, she said simply. Over coffee in Melody's kitchen, Naomi explained what they had discovered. The identity of the bomber, the personal vendetta, and the risk it still posed. Your son may have been a loose end, she said quietly. We don't think Keller will return, but we want to be cautious. Melody clutched her mug. He's just a child. Naomi nodded. A child who changed the trajectory of a man worth $3 billion. That puts a spotlight on you both, whether you want it or not. That evening, Preston called Melody directly. I know you said no publicity, he began. And I'll respect that. But I have resources, security, legal counsel, anything you need. If there's even a 1% chance this man comes near your son again, I want you protected. I'm not used to people doing things for us, Melody replied honestly. Not without strings. There are no strings, Preston said quietly. There's just a little boy who reminds me of the person I once wanted to be, and a woman raising him alone who shouldn't have to be afraid. There was a pause. Then Melody said, Okay, but on one condition. Preston waited. I want Elijah to keep being a kid. No cameras, no press, no stage. Preston smiled. Deal. The next morning, Elijah received his second anonymous delivery. A sketchbook. Thick, leather-bound, with his name embossed in gold. Inside the cover was a single sentence, handwritten in block letters. For every hero who sees what others misdraw, what matters. Underneath it was a tiny sketch, a yellow car with blinking lights, and a little boy standing in front of it, hands outstretched, shouting to stop. Elijah blinked. He recognized the drawing style. It was Preston's. Back in the tower, Preston stared out his office window, hands in his pockets. The board still wanted his speech. The gala was back on in 10 days. But Preston Maddox knew one thing with certainty. He couldn't talk about innovation, or technology, or the future of education without first acknowledging the boy who had given him one more day to speak at all. And deep down he knew, this story wasn't just about a bomb. It was about what happens when the right person listens, even when they're the smallest voice in the room. 10 days passed, like water slipping through tight fingers. Preston Maddox stood backstage at the Crystal Horizon Hotel, straightening the cuffs of his black tuxedo. Outside, over 400 guests filled the grand ballroom. Philanthropists, venture capitalists, educators, and media figures. They were all there to hear him speak, the titan of tech, the man behind Virion. But tonight, he wasn't that man. Not entirely. Behind him, the screen flickered through a slideshow of previous galas, students receiving scholarships, drones mapping rural schools, tablets in underfunded classrooms. It was legacy PR, polished, predictable. But this year, Preston had rewritten the speech, and this time, the real story wasn't on screen. It was 7 years old. And sitting quietly in the front row, Elijah Thompson tugged at the collar of his tiny navy suit. He looked up at his mum, Melody, seated beside him in a simple blue dress. The hotel had offered her a stylist. She declined. "I'm not here to impress anyone," she'd said. "Only to see my son stand tall." Security had triple-checked the perimeter. Naomi stood near the exit, sharp-eyed, scanning every guest. "Are you nervous?" Melody whispered to Elijah. He nodded once. "Me too," she said with a gentle smile. "But I think you're about to teach this room more than any billionaire ever could." Preston stepped onto the stage to a standing ovation. But his eyes weren't on the crowd. They were on the boy who once shouted 3 words that changed everything. "Don't get in the car." He adjusted the mic, then paused. "Tonight, I was supposed to talk to you about the future of education, about our new initiative to fund AI tools for public school systems. But something happened 2 weeks ago that shifted my view of what really needs funding." The room went still. Preston recounted the story, calmly, clearly, no drama. The morning drive, the scream, the wires under the seat, and the boy who saw it all. He didn't name Elijah outright. He didn't reveal the street, the house, or any traceable detail. But the entire room leaned in, breath held as he finished. And when I asked him why he ran, Elijah simply said, "I didn't want anyone to get hurt." Preston turned toward the front row. "Elijah, would you mind standing?" The boy rose slowly. The crowd gasped, then clapped, then erupted. Some guests wiped tears from their eyes. Elijah waved shyly. Preston smiled. "I don't believe in chance," he continued. "I believe in courage. And I believe the bravest person in this room is about 3 feet tall and carries a stuffed lion named Rocket." Laughter, applause, relief. After the speech, Preston made his way down from the stage and straight toward Elijah. "Walk with me?" he asked. The boy nodded. Together they stepped outside onto the terrace overlooking the city skyline. Quiet. Calm. Preston knelt down to Elijah's level. "You doing okay?" "I guess," the boy said. "Big crowd," Preston offered. "Yeah," Elijah admitted. "My legs were shaking." "That's normal," Preston said. "Even mine still do sometimes." "You?" Elijah blinked. "You're not scared of anything." Preston shook his head slowly. "That's the thing. Everyone's scared of something, but heroes do what's right anyway." They watched the traffic far below, taxis, limos. A yellow sports car passed, and Elijah tensed for half a second. Preston noticed. "I sold the Ferrari," he said. Elijah looked up. "Why?" "Because the boy who saved me said it wasn't safe," Preston replied. "And sometimes you listen when the right person tells you to stop." Inside, the gala shifted into cocktail hour. Reporters whispered. Guests mingled. Naomi stood beside Melody, keeping watch like a quiet guardian. "Your son's remarkable," she said. Melody smiled faintly. "He's always been like that, observant, soft-spoken, but when he sees something wrong, he acts." Naomi nodded. "That's rare." "So is what you're doing for him," Melody replied. "Most people wouldn't look back once they got what they needed." Naomi didn't answer. She simply turned her gaze back to the terrace. Back outside, Preston handed Elijah a small box. The boy opened it. Inside was a gold pin shaped like a lion, tiny and simple, but elegant. "What's this?" "It's something only 4 people in my company have ever received," Preston said. "We call it the Maddox Courage Pin. It's not about tech. It's about character." Elijah touched the pin gently. "Can I give it to Rocket?" Preston laughed. "Of course." "But only if Rocket understands he'll have to live up to it." The boy nodded solemnly. "He's ready." As the night wound down, guests began leaving. Some shook Preston's hand. Some approached Melody, offering praise or thanks, but no one overwhelmed them. Elijah stayed close to his mom, the lion pin now fastened carefully to Rocket's ear. Naomi approached Preston. Speech was a hit. Not the one they expected, he said. No, she agreed. But exactly what they needed. And later, as the SUV rolled quietly away from the hotel, Elijah fell asleep in the back seat, Rocket resting on his chest. Melody looked at Preston. You didn't have to do all this, she said softly. Preston looked at the boy in the rearview mirror. I didn't. But he did. She glanced at him. What happens next? Preston smiled. We let him dream, and we make sure no one ever gives him a reason to stop. 3 days after the gala, Melody Thompson found an envelope slipped under her door. No address, no return label, just her name, written in block letters. Inside, a photo, blurry, grainy, but unmistakable. It showed Elijah playing on the front lawn, Rocket the lion clutched under one arm. The timestamp was from 2 nights ago. There was no note, no explanation, but the message was clear. Someone had been watching. Melody rushed into Elijah's room. He was safe. Asleep, dreaming, but she wasn't. She paced the hallway, heart pounding, fingers shaking as she dialed the emergency line Preston Maddox had given her personally. He answered on the second ring. Melody? I got something, she whispered. A photo of Elijah. Preston didn't ask how. He just said, stay inside. I'm on my way. 23 minutes later, a black SUV pulled up outside the Thompson house. Naomi Grant stepped out first, scanning the street, then waved Preston forward. He walked in like a man already planning for war. Melody handed him the envelope. He studied the photo, zoomed. Probably a long lens. Someone was near your house recently. Was it him? Melody asked. Raymond Keller. I don't know yet, Preston replied, but he knows you matter to me, and he's not the type to strike twice with a bomb. This is different. It's personal now. Melody's voice trembled. Why target Elijah? Preston looked up. Because hurting Elijah would hurt me. Meanwhile, in a dingy motel across town, Raymond Keller watched the live stream of the gala replay on his cracked tablet. There it was again. Preston Maddox. Applauded, admired, toasted. And beside him that boy, that perfect little hero. Raymond's lip curled. That should have been my daughter on that stage. That should have been my life. He stared at the screen until the battery died. Back at the Thompson house, Preston made a decision. You're coming with me, he said. We'll move you tonight. Melody hesitated. I don't want to uproot him again. Preston met her eyes. He won't be safe here, and I refuse to gamble with a child's life. Melody looked at her sleeping son. Okay, she whispered. We'll go. By morning, they were in a secure compound in the hills outside the city-own of Preston's lesser-known properties. Not flashy, not tech-heavy. Just safe. Elijah adjusted quickly. The house had trees, space, books, a telescope on the balcony. But he noticed his mom watching the windows more often, and Preston on the phone, always whispering. He finally asked, Is the bad man coming back? Preston crouched beside him. We don't know. Elijah was quiet. Then he asked, If he comes, will you be scared? Preston considered. I'll be alert. That's different than scared. Elijah nodded like he understood. That evening, Preston stood on the balcony, staring at the distant lights of the city. Naomi joined him. He's getting bolder, she said. I underestimated him, Preston admitted. Naomi handed him a tablet. Surveillance footage from a gas station in Rockford, 40 miles out. A man matching Raymond's build had used a stolen card to buy burner phones and a prepaid bus pass. He was close. And he wasn't done. That night, Melody finally asked what she'd been afraid to voice. Why do you care so much? Preston was quiet for a long time. Because someone once saved me when they didn't have to, he said. And I never got to repay that. Elijah gave me a second chance at life. I won't waste it. Melody touched his hand. He trusts you, you know. I trust him, Preston said. That's the difference. 3 days passed. Then the breach. One of Preston's backup estates had been broken into. Nothing stolen, but a message scratched into the wall with a knife. I know where you sleep now. Preston didn't panic. He mobilized. By sundown, Naomi had locked down every route into the compound. Cameras, heat sensors, motion drones. And Elijah was moved to an interior safe room. Still, the tension crackled. Melody stayed close to him, reading books, keeping his world normal. But Preston's world wasn't normal anymore. He knew Raymond wasn't coming for money. He was coming for meaning. For revenge he believed was justified. At 2:13 a.m., a silent alarm tripped. A figure was caught on infrared pacing along the ridge. Naomi didn't wait. She dispatched 2 agents and pulled Preston into the control room. The image wasn't clear, but the silhouette was familiar. The limp, the stance, it was him. Preston stared at the screen, not afraid, just ready. He turned to Naomi. Let's finish this. Preston Maddox wasn't the type to hide behind walls. But this wasn't just about him anymore. It was about Elijah and Melody, and every promise he'd made, quiet ones, fierce ones, that no harm would ever touch that boy again. So when Naomi confirmed the figure outside was Raymond Keller, Preston didn't blink. Let him in, he said. Naomi froze. Preston, I need to end this face to face. The guards followed, protocol silent, tight, prepared. Naomi flanked the hallway, earpiece buzzing, gun holstered but ready. Preston waited alone in the East Wing library. Tall shelves, warm lighting, a single chair across from his own. At exactly 3:07 a.m., Raymond Keller stepped inside. He looked older than the mugshot, hair thinner, shoulders bent, but his eyes, those were the same, sharp, bitter, burnt. He smirked. Nice place, Maddox. Shame if someone burned it down. Preston didn't flinch. You were always theatrical, Ray. And you were always a thief in a nicer suit, Raymond shot back. A pause. Then, you set me up. Preston leaned forward. You sold proprietary code to our biggest rival. You tried to burn the company we built. You weren't just dangerous, you were reckless. I needed money. My daughter needed medicine. You wanted a shortcut, and when I didn't bail you out, you turned me into the enemy. Raymond's knuckles turned white. You took everything. No, Preston said quietly. You gave it away. A beat of silence stretched between them. Then Raymond's jaw tightened. You think I came here for an apology? For some pity check? I think you came to scare me, Preston said calmly. But I stopped being afraid the day a 7-year-old risked his life for mine. Raymond's face flickered. I saw the clip, he muttered. The gala. You parading him around like some golden boy. He is golden, Preston said evenly, because he still believes in good. Even after watching a stranger plant a bomb. Raymond's breath hitched. He saw me? He saved me, Preston replied. And I think, in a way, he saved you too. Raymond looked like he might spit. I came here to finish something. Preston nodded slowly. Then finish it, but understand what you're ending. You plant another bomb, you go to prison for life. You threaten Melody or Elijah, you die in a cage. He stood up, towering. I will protect that boy with every cent I have. Every favor I'm owed. And if you ever breathe near him again, I'll make sure your name is nothing more than a footnote in a redacted file. Raymond blinked, and for the first time he didn't look angry. He looked tired. I had a daughter once, Raymond said, voice low. You remember? Preston nodded. Her name was Talia. She died 3 years ago, pneumonia. I wasn't allowed at the funeral. Preston's heart shifted. Not enough to forgive, but enough to understand. I'm sorry, Raymond laughed, bitter. Too late. He pulled something from his pocket. Not a weapon. A photo. Of Talia at age 7, hair in braids, smiling wide. She'd have liked that kid, he said. Naomi burst through the door a second later. Sir, we need to. Preston raised a hand. Raymond was already turning. He didn't resist. He let the guards take him. No cuffs, no scene, just a whisper. Protect that boy. The next morning, Elijah sat at the kitchen counter drawing. Rocket the Lion had a new cape made of tissue paper. Melody stirred oatmeal, eyes on the window. Preston walked in, dark circles under his eyes, but his shoulders were lighter. Was it the man? Elijah asked softly. Preston nodded. Is he gone? Preston crouched beside him. He won't hurt you. Elijah was quiet, then asked, Did you hurt him? Preston smiled. No. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is not hit back. Melody watched them from the sink, and for the first time in days breathed easy. They were safe, but more than that, they were whole. The world doesn't always reward quiet courage. But this time it did. Not with applause, not with headlines, but with something deeper, something lasting. 3 days after Raymond Keller was taken into federal custody, Preston Maddox fulfilled the promise he had made silently to himself, one that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with redemption. He called Elijah and Melody back to the estate. This time, there was no security detail hovering near. No bodyguards in sunglasses, no armored SUVs. Just a long wooden table under the shade of a flowering oak. Melody clutched her handbag tightly. Elijah wore a button-down shirt and jeans, hands sticky with a crayon he'd been gripping since breakfast. Preston greeted them at the front, sleeves rolled to his elbows. You didn't have to come, he said warmly. Melody gave a small smile. You've done so much. We can at least hear you out. They sat together, just the three of them, no press. No cameras, just the sound of birds and wind brushing the hedges. Preston pulled out a folder. I've set up a trust in Elijah's name, he said. Fully funded for education, housing and healthcare. No strings attached. It grows with him. It's his. Melody's eyes widened. Mr. Maddox. Preston, he corrected gently. You saved me by raising him. Let me return the favor. She swallowed hard. This isn't charity. It's gratitude, he said, and investment, because if Elijah's willing to stand between a man and a bomb at age 7, I can only imagine what he'll do at 17. Elijah had stayed quiet the whole time, but now he looked up. I want to build robots, he said. Preston chuckled. Robots? With wheels and claws, and they help people. Melody smiled through tears. Preston leaned forward. Then we'll build them, together. But word travels, even when you don't invite it. Especially when it involves a billionaire and a child with a green jacket. The press had tried, how they tried to spin it. Boy hero saves tech tycoon. From the projects to the penthouse. Who is the little boy who stopped a murder? Preston's PR team fought off requests, interviews, magazine covers. Elijah's face was blurred in every photo. Melody's name scrubbed from all stories. Preston didn't want fame for them. He wanted peace, but peace, like courage, sometimes requires effort. So he called a friend. Her name was Dr. Camille Rhodes, a former White House advisor on childhood trauma, now running a private institute for gifted youth. She met Elijah over ice cream at a local park. He showed her a drawing of a mechanical lion with armor and jet boosters. She asked, "What would you name it?" He grinned. "Rocket." Like my stuffed one. 2 hours later, she called Preston. He's not just smart, she said. He's different. Focused, intuitive, we'd be honored to support him. Preston's voice cracked slightly. So would I. And just like that, the path widened. Within a month, Elijah began weekend enrichment classes, robotics, coding, design. A private tutor helped him adjust without removing him from Melody's daily life. Everything moved carefully, intentionally. No disruption, no headlines. Just growth. One Saturday morning, Elijah sat on the grass at the Maddox estate, building a solar-powered car out of recycled cardboard. Preston watched from a bench, a cup of coffee in hand. Naomi sat beside him. "You think this is enough?" she asked softly. Preston glanced at her. "For who? For you. After what happened?" He considered that. "No," he said. "But it's a start." That evening, Melody joined them for dinner. Over grilled salmon and roasted vegetables, she asked Preston a question that had been sitting on her tongue for weeks. "Why us?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he refilled Elijah's lemonade. Then he said, "Because I was raised by a man who made every success feel like a debt, who believed kindness was weakness. I built my empire proving him wrong." He looked at Melody. "And then your son proved me right." That night, as Elijah fell asleep in one of the guest rooms, Rocket the lion tucked under his arm, Preston stood by the door and watched him breathe. In the soft glow of the hallway light, the boy looked peaceful. Whole, unaware of the ripple he had caused, unaware of the man whose heart he'd cracked open. Preston whispered a quiet goodnight, and for the first time in years, he believed something he hadn't dared hope for. That maybe, just maybe, saving the world didn't start with a billion-dollar initiative or a press release. Maybe it started with a 7-year-old boy screaming into the wind, "Don't get in the car." Even as life began to settle into something resembling peace, Preston Maddox knew better than to trust silence. Because silence is where old wounds fester, and buried things don't stay buried forever. 2 months had passed since the attempted bombing. Millionaire, officially called Elijah Thompson in all correspondence, was thriving. His robotics instructor said he had the kind of mind that sees beyond instruction. Preston had spent more afternoons with the boy than he had with most adults in his life. They'd grown close in that quiet, unspoken way that didn't need declarations. Melody, too, had softened. She still worked at the hospital, but now with fewer shifts. Her home was repaired, her debts cleared. Her son smiled more, laughed more. But just as the summer sun began to wane, a storm rolled in, and it wasn't the kind that could be measured by clouds. It started with a phone call. Detective Marla Green, NYPD Major Crimes. "We found something," she said. Preston was in his office, half a world away in Tokyo, preparing to close a deal with a new AI partner. "Found what?" "The man who planted the device. Raymond Keller wasn't acting alone." Preston's stomach dropped. Marla continued. "We traced activity on a burner phone. Multiple communications routed through proxy servers. But one location pinged local twice." "Where?" "Outside Melody Thompson's house." Preston cancelled the Tokyo meeting without explanation. His jet landed in New York just before dawn. He didn't go home. He went to Elijah. When Melody opened the door, Preston didn't wait for pleasantries. "Has anyone been near your house?" She blinked. "What? No, why? Any unfamiliar cars parked nearby?" "Sometimes delivery trucks." "No." "Not Amazon or UPS? Anything strange?" Melody paused. "There's been a grey van." "No logos. Just parked 2 houses down, engine running, usually in the evening." "Why?" Preston didn't answer. He turned and walked down the street. The van wasn't there. But the fear was. Back at his estate, Preston called his head of security. "I need full surveillance," he said. Melody's block, cameras, motion sensors, neighborhood traffic reports, everything. Then he called Marla Green. Do you think Elijah's in danger? I think, she said carefully, someone's watching to see what he knows. Preston exhaled slowly. But he's just a boy. Marla's voice hardened. He's the boy who identified the bomber and ruined someone's plan. That makes him a liability. For the first time since the attack, Preston felt rage boiling beneath his ribs. Not fear, rage. He thought they'd ended this. He thought the arrest of Keller was the end of the chapter. But like all things built on revenge, it wasn't clean. And now the boy who'd saved his life was paying the price. That night, he called Elijah. The boy's voice was sleepy. Hi, Mr. Preston. Hey, champ. I just wanted to check on you. I'm okay. A pause. Are you scared again? Elijah asked softly. Preston closed his eyes. A little. There was silence on the line. Then, it's okay to be scared, Elijah said. That's how you know you're brave. The next day, Preston took action. He hired a former CIA analyst to dig through Keller's past communications. He tripled security around Melody's house quietly. And he moved Elijah's weekend classes to a secure campus, one that required passcodes to enter. No press, no questions, no interruptions, but the questions wouldn't stay away. A reporter from the Post showed up at the hospital where Melody worked, asked about her connection to the Maddox estate. Another appeared outside Elijah's new program, holding up a photo of the Ferrari. Preston's legal team shut them down, but the whispers had begun. And then, one morning, Elijah came downstairs holding a flyer. Someone had stuck it to the fence, a grainy photo of Raymond Keller. Below it, one sentence: "You destroyed a father to save a stranger." Melody dropped her coffee. Preston read it 3 times. Then he burned it. But the damage was done. That night, Elijah curled up under his covers and asked the question Preston had been dreading. Was he really my dad? The room was still. Melody froze, hand over her mouth. Preston crouched beside the bed. Yes, he said quietly, but he made a very bad choice. Why did he want to hurt you? Preston hesitated. Because sometimes, when people feel broken, they try to break others. Elijah nodded slowly. Does that mean I'll be bad too? Preston's heart shattered. He took Elijah's small hand in his. Never. You made a choice. You chose to help someone. You chose to be brave. That's who you are. The next day, Melody made a decision. She sat Elijah down and showed him a photo one of the few she had of Raymond Keller. I never told you about him because I didn't know how, she admitted, but you deserve the truth. Elijah listened, wide-eyed, and when it was done, he asked for a marker. He drew a red circle over the man's face. Then, in bold letters, he wrote, I'm not him. Preston read the sign hours later and didn't speak. He just nodded. And then, for the first time since the bombing, he slept through the night. Because now the boy wasn't just brave, he was free. It had been 6 months since Elijah Thompson sprinted across the front lawn and shouted the words that saved Preston Maddox's life. 6 months since a blinking red light beneath a Ferrari seat nearly rewrote the future. Now the gala had returned. Same ballroom, same donor base, same high-stakes energy. But everything had changed. The room shimmered with candlelight, violins warming up softly in the background. Waiters in black coats moved swiftly between tables. Industry giants mingled with philanthropists, trading business cards and ambition. But all eyes eventually drifted to the man in the black tuxedo standing by the far wall, his expression thoughtful, his hand resting lightly on the shoulder of a boy in a navy blue jacket. Preston Maddox didn't come to impress this year. He came to acknowledge a debt. Elijah looked up at him. Are you nervous? Preston chuckled. Terrified. Elijah grinned. Good. That means you care. As the host took the stage and the crowd quieted, a familiar hush swept through the room. Cameras readied, Phones hovered discreetly. And now, to introduce our keynote speaker, a man whose recent journey has reminded us all that real innovation starts with humanity, please welcome Mr. Preston Maddox. Polite applause followed as Preston stepped onto the stage, but instead of walking alone, he reached down, and Elijah followed him. Gasps rippled, not because of who the boy was, but because of what he represented. A child, a survivor, a symbol, a hero. Preston adjusted the mic, then looked across the sea of expectant faces. "I was supposed to speak about the future of technology tonight," he began. "But there's something more urgent than AI or software." He looked at Elijah. "It's this." He turned back to the crowd. "This boy, Elijah Thompson, saved my life." You could hear a pin drop. "I've spent 2 decades building systems to make life more efficient, faster, smarter. But none of those systems mattered the morning Elijah shouted at me not to get in that car. No algorithm could have seen what he saw. No drone could have felt what he felt. It took a child, one with no resources, no reason, no backup." He paused. "Just courage." Preston nodded to Elijah, who stepped forward. And with a surprisingly steady voice, the boy said, "I was scared, but I yelled anyway, because sometimes, even if you're little, you can still do something big." The room erupted. After the gala, the two walked through the garden outside the venue. Preston loosened his tie. Elijah kicked a pebble down the path. "You really didn't want to do the speech, did you?" the boy asked. "No," Preston said, "but I needed to." Elijah glanced up. "Why?" Preston stopped walking. "Because I owe it to the world to know your name, and I owe it to myself to remember what really matters." Suddenly a voice called out, "Mr. Maddox?" A woman approached, elegant, mid-50s, with press credentials in hand. "I know you don't do interviews, but can I ask just one question?" He hesitated. She looked at Elijah. "Actually, it's for him." Elijah tilted his head. "If you could say one thing to kids watching this, what would it be?" He thought a long time. Then he said softly, "Don't wait for someone bigger to do the right thing. Be the one who runs first." That quote would be printed in a dozen newspapers the next morning. But it was the next moment that mattered most. Because as Preston and Elijah walked toward the limo waiting by the curb, Elijah whispered, "Do you ever think we were supposed to meet?" Preston placed a hand on his shoulder. "Every day." That night, back at Melody's house, Elijah fell asleep clutching the commemorative plaque the gala had gifted him. Melody stood by the door watching him breathe. "You okay?" Preston asked. She nodded. "He's lighter now, like he's not carrying it alone anymore." Preston looked at her. "He's not." Weeks later, a new foundation was launched. The Elijah Fund. Its mission: to find and support young kids who act with courage when no one's watching. No red carpets. No hashtags, just real help. Preston funded it quietly. Elijah approved every grant. Years from now, they would look back on that morning in Woodland Heights and understand something deeper. That sometimes the most powerful partnerships aren't forged in boardrooms. They begin with a scream, a risk, a child running toward danger instead of away from it, because true wealth isn't what you accumulate. It's who you protect. And sometimes, the smallest voice saves the biggest life. In a world where power and privilege often overshadow quiet courage, the story of Elijah Thompson reminds us that heroism has no age, no title, and no uniform. A 7-year-old boy trusted his instincts and saved a billionaire's life without reward, without hesitation. For older generations who've seen decades of change, this tale reinforces a timeless truth. Integrity and bravery aren't reserved for the powerful. They live in everyday people, in neighbors, in children, in us. Preston Maddox, a man who thought he had everything, realized that true wealth lies not in fortune, but in connection, humility, and purpose. It took the voice of a child to remind him and all of us that we are never too old to grow, to give back, or to start over. As we age, we may question what our legacy will be. Let Elijah's moment of courage and Preston's transformation serve as a gentle challenge. What impact can we still make? Who can we protect with the wisdom we've earned? Because sometimes the greatest gift we give the world is simply choosing to listen, act, and believe in goodness